Excited to welcome Pulitzer Prize-winning author Buzz Bissinger to the show. Buzz, congratulations on the new book, The Mosquito Bowl, A Game of Life and Death in World War II, and thanks for the time.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I am a Philadelphian and I listen to you guys, so it's great to be on.
Well, we really appreciate that. And Buzz, we did want to, before we actually get to the book, and the book is amazing, because we wanted to talk to you a little bit about your time in Philadelphia. From what I remember, you actually were doing what we're doing before we were doing it.
I had a brief run doing it on what was known as the Big Talker, WPHT. And, I really liked it. I mean, the microphone is addictive. It's a narcotic. But honestly, the problem was I had not worked in an office environment in 20 years. Back when I was in an office in a newsroom, you got angry, you yelled, and then you made up the next day. It doesn't work that way anymore. I would get into sort of little verbal spats with people, and I kept getting reported to HR. So they fired me after 6 months. But I liked it. I don't know if I was any good at it, but I liked it.
Well, you were, and not only were you good at that, you spent time working for the Philadelphia Inquirer, a long time working for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we've seen that you've said that you consider yourself a Philadelphian, even though you're from New York. What do you remember most about your time in Philadelphia?
Well, you know what? We still have a presence here. We go back and forth between the Northwest, and we do have an apartment in Philly, so we maintain roots. My kids are here. I love Philadelphia, and I have to say that it has gotten exponentially better. I went to school here in the 70s, then came back, worked for the Inquirer in the 80s, and then came back in the early 90s to write a book, A Prayer for the City, about Ed Rendell when he was mayor. And the city was in the pits then, but with each step, the city has gotten better and better. It's gotten more and more lively. I know there's a crime issue, but I see kids in the street. When I say kids, college graduates. You never saw that in Philadelphia. And I think more and more people are realizing, look at the quality of life I can have in Philly versus the quality of life I can have in New York. Because for a young person graduating, there is no quality of life in New York. You're with 4 other people in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I love the city. I follow the sports. I think the Eagles actually could be really good this year. I worry about the Sixers and the blend of Maxey and Harden, because I think Maxey's too deferential, and the Sixers sort of eat too many of their young, and I just love him. The Phillies, I think they'll make the playoffs. They got rid of Joe Girardi, who I knew was a fraud. So, the city is still very, very much in my heart. Listen, by the way, I knew I grew up in New York, but I went to Penn at 18. I spent 35 years here. I'm a Philadelphian, okay? I swear. I don't know if you're a native. You Philadelphians are really hard on people who were not born here. But I consider myself a Philadelphian.
And look, you've embraced the city, and while the mic may have given you fun, it's the pen that seems to have let you tell the story so many times. And with this one, here we are with this book that it interweaves military heroics with college football. And my understanding is this was 5 years in the making. How did you even find out about this story to begin to tell it?
Well, you're always looking for great ideas, and they are ideas you think will work, and they come sporadically. Friday Night Lights, I wrote when I was very young about high school football in Texas. It took off. And after that, I said, wow, how am I going to top this? It takes me 5 or 6 years to come up with another idea. The book's called The Mosquito Bowl. It's an actual game, as close to the real thing as you could get, that took place on the Pacific island of Guadalcanal, with the 6th Division of the Marine Corps several months before they shipped out into the horror of Okinawa. There were 2 regiments of the 6th Division, the 4th and the 29th, that would argue constantly who would have the better football team if we played each other, because they were loaded. And I mean loaded with great college players, seven captains from Notre Dame and Brown, players across the country. Most have been in D1 starting, 3 All-Americans, first-round draft pick, 2 second-round draft picks, loaded. And finally, Marine says, we don't argue, we fight it out. Let's play it. Let's play a game. Let's play against each other. Let's get it on. And it wasn't pickup. They built goalposts. They printed up programs. They printed up rosters. They had a PA system. They made a regulation field out of one of the parade's grounds, and there was no grass. It was all dirt and coral. They broadcasted on the Mosquito Radio Network, and it became as the Mosquito Bowl. 1,100 Marines came. They were allowed to get drunk, which of course they did, they're Marines, and gamble, which they did. And it was 3 hours of getting away from the constant fear and constant thoughts in your head of, am I going to live? Am I going to die when I go into combat? And the upshot is, of the 65 who played, many of them young officers, 15 were later killed at Okinawa. So when I read about that, I said, this is a book, if I can get at it. This has all the elements you want of a book, a driving narrative, the ability to make characters come alive, and then taking the reader from the beginning to the end, to the, as I say, the unimaginable horror of Okinawa.
You know, the book reads like almost like a fiction novel, but it is real. And when you're doing your research for a book like this, did you come across any letters, or were you able to talk to anybody that really stuck out as a reason to motivate you to write this book the right way?
Well, I knew going in that of the 65 players, only one was still alive. I knew that, and I did interview him, and he was great. But, you know, I kept saying, well, how am I going to get at this? How am I going to portray some of these guys who played in the game from beginning to end? How am I going to make the reader care about them? How am I going to show their heroism, their sense of duty, their willingness to sacrifice? And luckily, I did find several players whose families had kept everything. Wonderful letters home, letters back and forth, letters from mothers, letters from fiancés, report cards, little drawings they did as kids. And then I said, all right, I can do it. I can capture these guys in a legitimate way. And many of the families were incredibly helpful. They wanted the story told, because at the end, it's a story of great heroism, but heroism has a price, and the price for 15 of these good, and I call them men, they were really kids, basically 18, the oldest was 25, but it's to honor their memory, and also to remind people of what America, you know, we all say, make America great again. Well, this was the peak of American greatness because of the unity. Everyone was in this together. You know, as I said, there is no red state and there is no blue state in a foxhole. It's men protecting each other, and all those differences melt away. So we can bridge our differences if we want to.
You know, you talk about the families wanting the story told. This one was personal for you too. Your dad was a Marine at Okinawa. And can you talk more about how you learned about his service through this, and how you were able to make the men come alive to tell this story?
Well, I knew my dad had been a Marine. I knew he had been at Okinawa, but he never wanted to talk about it. He would joke about it a little bit. But you could tell he just wasn't going to go there. And my mother recalls an incident. There was a family get together, and the war came up, and he had to leave the room. He had to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette. Obviously, like so many, he saw things that were unspeakable. He wanted to get on with his life, but I knew nothing really. And in the course of working on the book early on, I said, well, you know, I don't even know what he did. I don't know what his rank was. I don't know what regiment he was in. Let's find out. And so I got his muster rolls. We have the same name, so it was almost like reading my name. And there is his name as a rifleman on the front lines in Okinawa. And this is really freaky. He was in one of the regiments that I'm writing about. He was in the 4th Regiment. I mean, for all I know, he was at this incredible game called the Mosquito Bowl, which was well known at the time. Knowing my father, he liked to drink, he liked to gamble, and he loved football. So he, you know, the odds are he was there, and that kind of blew my mind. This is not a book about searching for your father, but it did put me over the top. I sort of said, I got to do this in his honor, basically.
Well, you talk about drinking and gambling. This game was not unlike any other football game. There was beer at this game. There was gambling at this game,
Right.
and there were former All-Americans from Wisconsin, Brown, Notre Dame that were on this team. Can
Correct.
you talk a little bit more about what you found out about how they were able to basically create a game that would have been something we'd all want to watch back here?
Well, they were stationed at Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal was the training area for the 6th Marine Division. They were there for, some of them had been there for almost 6 months. And, you know, they're Marines. Marines want to get it on. If I want to know, am I going to live or am I going to die? It's as simple as that. What I don't want to do is to sit around and think about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to imagine the worst. And, as part of the training, they had fields. They had a lot of volleyball fields. They had baseball fields. But when they started arguing over who would have the better football team, the commanding general, Lemuel Shepard, said, let's do it. It'll be great for morale. It'll give guys a diversion. And you're right. I mean, this game was the forerunner to modern games: gambling, booze, and, beating the crap out of each other, which they did for 3 joyous hours. They were allowed to really be boys again. They were allowed to do something they loved that had been a part of their lives. And then 4 months later, they're on a transport ship going into the teeth of hell, which was Okinawa. Just to put it in quick perspective, at Okinawa, 240,000 people died in 82 days. I mean, think about that. That's 3,000 a day. That's Americans, that's Japanese, and that's civilians. 240,000. I've read histories saying it was the 7th bloodiest battle of all time. And there may be more who died, and the casualty rate was well over 50%. And I think Truman was so horrified by the casualty rate, because the Japanese only goal was to kill as many Americans possible in the vain hope that we would come to the table and negotiate. But I believe this was the primary reason Truman dropped the bomb. He said to himself, I'm not going to lose another American kid on foreign soil because of the shock of what happened at Okinawa. And, that's one of the reasons these 15 men gave up their lives for, the cause of our freedoms.
It's an interesting contrast, because on the one hand, I saw you say you're aiming to create a portrait of America in the process of losing its innocence.
Right.
You're doing it through the guise of these young men who don't have cleats and are trying to find shoes and a uniform, who play on a coral football field and end up bloody in a 0-0 tie, just taking a break from the horror that they may be facing. Can you talk about how important this respite was for them, these couple hours?
Well, it was a couple hours, but there was a buildup. Everyone started talking it. It got exciting. You have guys, they're a little bit rusty, but they can get after it. They can still play football. And as I say, you had all Americans on each side in each regiment. You had captains from, as I said, Notre Dame, Brown, California, Texas Christian. So there was excitement. Everyone knew who these guys were before they got to Guadalcanal. I mean, Tony Bukovich was an All-American from Purdue. Dave Schreiner was a 2-time All-American from Wisconsin. John McLaury had been a captain at Brown back in the days, believe it or not, when East Coast football was really good. And he started with the New York Giants. So you had all these players. And so there was a lot of anticipation. They actually had a few exhibitions, but they drew up plays and they took it very seriously. They wanted to make it into a spectacle, which is why they did all these things, the goalposts, the marching bands. They really wanted to make it something special, something resonant. And I was lucky people kept the programs. And so that's how I could see the names on the rosters. But even though it was only a few hours, it did resonate because it was a beautiful date. It was Christmas Eve of 1944. So it was a way of bringing Christmas home to guys who were several thousand miles away from home. And the game was part of that. This was bringing a little bit of America to a little island in the middle of nowhere.
In an interview, I saw you were asked, why should people care? Which I found an interesting question somebody should ask you. But you said it's a story of poignancy, loss, bravery, and even a love story. Everyone's flawed, but the men who served and died or lived through Okinawa were magnificent men from time and place so far away that we're at now that it can make you cry. Can you talk more about those men and tell people why they should care about this book?
Well, obviously, as a writer, I mean, that's always your hope. That's always your hope, and that's always the doubt. Will they connect? Will they read? And for me, the key then was to make them come alive. And, they all came from different backgrounds in America, and that was of appeal to me, too. So you use the letters, you use the paper trail, you use documents, you use whatever you can to uplift them. So you have Dave Schreiner, a farm boy from Lancaster, Wisconsin, although his family was wealthy, they were merchants. His worst language was golly gee whiz. I mean, the worst thing he did as a kid was he played hooky one day to go trout fishing with his friends. the perfect All-American, really perfect, handsome, 6'2", shy, self-effacing. Tony Bukovic, the son of a father who had come from Croatia, where he had experienced a tremendous amount of racism, which is what America often shows all the time towards new immigrants. Tony was a great football and baseball player, and he got to college because of his prowess in sports, and had two other brothers who made it to college as well because of football. You have Bob Bauman, who was a teammate of Schreiner's, and he was the loosest of the bunch. He liked to have fun. He liked to drink beer. He liked women. He and Schreiner were best friends, so they really played off each other. And then you had George Murphy, who was the captain of Notre Dame. And what I found is they were very self-effacing. They were very modest men. They almost never talked about their accolades, to the point where they knew who they were. A lot of people knew who they were, but George Murphy's tent mate had no idea that he was the captain of Notre Dame because he never talked about it. But, you know, they had girlfriends. Schreiner had a fiance he fell madly in love with. His letters are filled with just sort of simple poignancy, wanting to reassure his mother and his fiance that he would be okay, that he would be all right, and please not worry. And I was really struck by, you know, how beautiful that was. And Schreiner at saying one point to his fiance Odette, "I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting to get home, to be with you. And that's all I care about." And, you know, when I read that, I got choked up. I mean, I wrote the book with a little picture of Dave Schreiner next to me as motivation to remember, why am I writing this? I'm writing this because these men, their memories need to be honored. And, you know, I would look at it from time to time, and almost in a sense, I would see my dad, because my dad looked like these guys. My dad was 19, and, you know, I would get choked up and say, I hope at the end I have honored these guys. I hope at the end the reader has fallen in love with them and cares about them and connects with them and really wants to know what happens to them on the island of Okinawa.
Buzz, this is a history book for a lot of people, and people who love American history, and for people who don't, they should learn about this through this history. Did you see yourself as a historian as you were writing this? And as you were writing this, did you talk to people within the military that wanted this story to be out for those that never heard the story before?
I became a historian, although I certainly was not. My books had elements of history, but they were all, you know, immersion journalism. I was there. I was there for Friday Night Lights. I witnessed the team as it played and the season unfolded. I was there for the book I wrote about Mayor Ed Rendell, A Prayer for the City. I was able to be with him for 4 years in his first term. I was there with Tony La Russa when he was managing the Cardinals, and I wrote the book 3 Nights in August. I wasn't there for any of this. And that requires a whole new set of skills, a lot of research, learning how to write about history, both with authority, but with synthesis, so the pages don't, you know, go on forever. And as I say, I got lucky. I mean, the letters sealed the deal. There were hundreds of them, and that's when I realized I would be able to, I hope, and I think I did succeed, to make these men come alive. I believe this is my best book. How it sells, how it doesn't sell, is in the hands of the gods. But I think it's my most complex book. And the stakes here are way beyond high school football. The stakes here are, you know, it's life and death. And in war, life and death it's a matter of luck, being in the wrong place at the right time, or the right place at the wrong time. And that was wincing to me, the circumstances under which some of these men did not survive. And questionable patrols where they really were exposed. But at the bottom line is, these men felt we are doing our duty, and doing your duty is to take orders and do things without question. There was no sense of, I'm not going to wear a mask in a foxhole. You did what you were told, and there was a commonality. You were all in it together, of every socioeconomic stripe, which to me makes the book all the more powerful. We talk about let's make America great and all that, but this was an America in unity, regardless of race, regardless of gender. We were together, and I think the book shows what can happen when America is together.
As somebody who loves American history and books about it, this is one of your best books. But before we let you go, I wanted to talk to you. Obviously, you've written Friday Night Lights, but I wanted to just talk to you because it's in the news today. LeBron James, you spent a lot of time with LeBron James writing Shooting Stars. Could you tell, and about his high school years, could you tell from your time with LeBron close to 2 decades ago now, that he was going to be using his platform the way that he is, that he would be such an outspoken leader in the community?
Absolutely not. And that was certainly not the fault of LeBron. I forget how old he was when we did this, but he was young. He was still developing. I think he was still with the Cavaliers, and a lot of people didn't like him. They thought he was a punk because of the way he supposedly conducted himself in high school, and being named the chosen one by Sports Illustrated when he was 15. So I think his head was really not into the book. Now, it was an ensemble piece about 5 kids, including LeBron, who stayed together for the duration of high school to become a team and ultimately state champion. But his heart wasn't in it. And, that hurts any book when your main subject is really not into it. Watching LeBron evolve, particularly after the debacle that I'm taking my talents to North Beach, where he won't admit it, but he learned a lot. And he actually did admit it. I think LeBron has become an amazing spokesman. He has used his platform. He has realized that, I actually do occupy a pivotal role in society as an important figure, and people will listen. So I think it's been great. By the way, there's a movie coming out based on the book. But I don't get any money, so I don't care.
We'll still plug it for you. Don't worry.
There you go. But it is coming out. I mean, it's being shot.
You talk about him having his heart in it. You definitely had your heart in this book. You have your heart in all the books you write, but we wish you the best of luck with this one. The book is The Mosquito Bowl, a game of life and death in World War II, a very poignant read. Buzz, thanks for giving us some time. We wish you the best of luck with the book, and we hope we get to talk to you again one day.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.